How many times have you been faced with a decision and thought, my gut feeling is telling me something? Maybe your gut was telling you to take that job or turn down that date. Maybe it was saying, don't trust this person with a secret. Sometimes it feels like your gut instinct was right. Other times, not so much. But what does it mean to have a gut reaction? How is that different from your intuition? And can you make yourself to be better at listening to what it's telling you? Intuition might seem like an unquantifiable quality, but it's an area our guest Laura Huang has spent years studying. In our conversation, we talk about the difference between intuition and gut feel, and why they're not the same thing. You'll hear how gut feeling can show up as a spidey sense, a Eureka moment, or even a jolt that shifts your perspective. Laura shares practical ways to train your intuiting process, avoid mistakes, and use it to make better decisions, especially when the stakes are high and the data is incomplete. Welcome to Visiting Experts, a Rotman School podcast for lifelong learners exploring transformative ideas about business and society with the influential scholars, thinkers, and leaders featured in our acclaimed speaker series. I'm your host, Brett Hendrie, and I'm joined today by Laura, a professor of management and organizational development at Northeastern University. Her research focuses on the role of intuition and interpersonal signaling in entrepreneurship, workplace interactions, and decision-making. Her terrific new book is You Already Know, The Science of Mastering Your Intuition, which unpacks what a gut feeling really is, reveals what's happening in our minds when intuition kicks in, and shows us how to harness all of this to make clear and more confident decisions. Laura, welcome to the Rotman School and to the Visiting Experts podcast.
Thanks. Pleasure to be with you here today.
Laura, let's begin with this. So many of us rely on what we interchangeably refer to as gut feeling and intuition in our daily lives, whether it's deciding who to hire, what project to take on, what path we think will be most successful. In your book, you distinguish, though, between the ideas of gut feeling and intuition. What's the difference between the two in your perception, and why is it important for us to understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that kind of speaks to the fact we all have kind of a lay definition of what we think gut feel is. And one of the reasons why we misunderstand what gut feel is because we do use those two terms interchangeably. We think that intuition and gut feel are sort of the same thing. And that creates all sorts of issues where some people might think of gut feel as like this mystical, magical kind of quality where you can look at a Van Gogh painting and immediately know whether it's a real one or a fake one. Whereas there's other people who their definition of gut feel is, no, it's something that's biased and it's based on heuristics and shortcuts. And so we have to be careful not to let our gut feel bias us. We need to collect more data to make sure that we're checking what that intuition might be. One of the ways that we can be much more precise in understanding what gut feel is, and thereby making it a factor that really does become a superpower for ourselves and mastering it, is by first understanding that there is a distinction. There is what is called an intuiting process. And at the end of that process, there is a discrete gut feel outcome. And so during that intuiting process, what I find in my research is that there is all sorts of things that are happening. We are taking data, we're taking our personal experiences, our expertise, our background, our culture, even the trauma we might have experienced, and all of that is getting aggregated during this intuiting process. And then at the very end of that process, it culminates in almost like this executive summary or this flash of clarity that I talk about, which is our gut feel. But one step in mastering our gut feel is by disentangling the two so that we can understand all of the things, all of the components, all of the pieces in that process, as well as understanding what that outcome actually looks like. How does it manifest? What are those flashes of clarity and what do they look like?
How should people distinguish that process of intuiting and the outcome of the gut feel from our emotions or our biases or feeling, I don't want to do this because I don't like X, Y, Z, or I'm interested in this, so I'm going to go that way? What's the difference between those two?
gut feel is one of those things where like it's super easy to have a quick definition, but it's very, very difficult to really understand what it is. And so one of the things that you're alluding to is emotions. So one of the mistakes we make is sometimes we think emotions are our gut feel. So we might feel a sense of urgency and we're like, I got to act on this. Or we might feel really excited about something and think that that's the direction we want to go in. Or we might be feeling nervous about something and, no, I don't want to touch that. But emotions are actually not gut feel. Emotions are a part of gut feel. There's one of the factors that we are embedding into our gut feel during that intuiting process, but they are not the same as our gut feel. Think about emotions like your children. You don't let your children drive the car because they would crash it, but you also don't shove them in the trunk because they would die. You want your children and you want your emotions in the back seat where they can be seen and heard and attended to, but they're not actually in control of anything, nor are they getting completely quelled or squashed. Something that I do myself and the executives that I coach, I tell them to do this exact exercise, which is the next time you're feeling that emotion, any sort of emotion, that sense of urgency, that nervousness, that excitement, whatever it is, that's compelling you to act, just pause for a second and ask yourself, would I be making this same decision if I wasn't feeling this emotion? You can also wait 2 hours or whatever, or 24 hours and the next day. Do you feel the same way? Do you want to make the same decision? And if you do, then it's probably your gut feel. But if you don't, it's probably your emotions trying to take the front seat. There are different decisions that we make all the time. And your gut feel never lies. It never lies to you ever. It is 100% correct. And here's the big if. As long as you're using it for the right type of decisions. Broadly, there are 4 different types of decisions out there. There are simple decisions. That's the first. There are complicated decisions. Those are the second. There are complex decisions. That's the third. And then there are chaotic decisions. If we start out with those simple decisions are ones where there is an answer. There is a yes, no, or there is a probabilistic answer. So think flipping a coin, heads or tails. It will be heads 50% of the time. Simple decisions are ones where you have the data, you have the information, you have the probabilities, you have all of the binary yes, no's, all of the sort of information that you need. You should never be using your gut feel for simple problems or simple decisions because at best, your decision, your gut feel will be redundant. Complicated decisions are where it gets a little more complicated because we should also never be using our gut feel for complicated decisions, ever. Complicated decisions are just a series of simple decisions. You can think of them as simple decisions stacked on top of each other. Mm-hmm. So the reason why we sometimes still use our gut feel for those decisions is because it's time consuming to get the data, or we might need certain expertise for a couple of those simple problems that are stacked on top of each other, or we might need to find the right people or find the right resources, find the right access to that information. We start to get lazy. We start to take shortcuts. We should never be using our gut feel to make complicated decisions, and yet we do. Then there are complex and chaotic decisions. And these are decisions where there's so many interdependencies, there's so much personal sort of influence or subtleties or nuances and all sorts of things that make it such that you will never be able to get all the information. You're never going to be able to get the information on everyone's consumer preferences and competitor actions and strategic moves and timing and regulations and all of those things. At best, we would maybe be able to get 70 to 80% of the data. And so those are the decisions where we have to be able to trust and rely upon our gut feel.
You said that your gut feeling never lies, and you write that in the book, and that really struck out to me. What allows you to be so definitive to say that it never lies in those situations?
It's about the action that you're taking. You and I might have a completely different gut feel about the same problem. So the problem might be, should I quit my job and move to Denver? Your gut feel might be telling you, no way, no how. And my gut feel might be telling, yeah, this is what you've got to do. And we would both be right. Because we're individuals, we're different people. We've got different mental models and schemas and prototypes and patterns and experiences that we're drawing from to make this decision. So that's this first piece. But the second piece is what I talked a little bit about, which is action. Your gut feel is what allows you to take action. So even if my gut feel is wrong, I put wrong in sort of air quotes, like wrong in the fact that I shouldn't move to Denver. You're taking that action, and just like there's that intuiting process, you take that action and then you continue to iterate and make changes and feel out different variables to make that decision the right one. And that's what I mean by gut feel is always right. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. Another way to say that your gut feel is not meant to have you be at point A and identify where do you need to be at point B exactly. Right. It's about going for directionality. Your gut feel points you in a direction to a certain quadrant. And then it allows you to take that action to go in that quadrant so that as you're heading in that direction, you are still bobbing and weaving and continuing to make other decisions, but you're in the right direction. You're going for that directionality, which makes it ultimately the right decision.
This was one of the most interesting ideas in your book to me, that gut feel can be circular or even self-fulfilling, and that there's a process that people go through to make it the right decision for them. How did you come about to that perspective?
We do so many things in our lives linearly. We read books linearly. Page 1, page 2, page 3. We give presentations linearly. Slide 1 leads to this, leads to that. But in actuality, the way that we live our lives, the way we make our decisions are not linear at all. We might be reading a magazine article and there's one line that sticks out to us today, and that reminds us of something that we experienced when we were 5 years old. And that links to something that we learned when we were in college or in university. And we are aggregating things in this way that is also not linear. And our intuiting process is working in that way as well.
You mentioned being able to actually master and understand that gut feeling. And in your book, you differentiate different manifestations, which I want to talk to you about in a moment. But first, if you're enjoying this conversation, you might also like the Executive Summary, our other podcast where we unpack the latest research shaping leadership and business. Season 4 just launched with fresh thinking from Rotman faculty and guests. You can find the Executive Summary wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, now let's talk about manifestations. In your book, you talk about Eureka moments, which I think people understand intuitively. You talk about spidey sense, again, something that's common in the vernacular, and also jolts as a realization. What is the benefit and practical usage of being able to distinguish between those three manifestations for people who are trying to master their gut?
What I find in my research is that universally, we all experience Eureka moments, which are these like aha moments. We all experience spidey sense moments, which are these uh-oh kind of moments. And then we all experience jolts, which I sometimes talk about instead of an aha or an uh-oh. It's more of like a whoa, where we are fundamentally shifting something that we thought was one way, but now we realize it's something else. So these are common to everyone. We all experience these manifestations. However, we all experience them differently, uniquely. So your Eureka moment, for example, you might feel it physically differently, emotionally differently, cognitively differently than I would. Physically, you might feel it as a nervousness. I might feel it as something in the pit of my stomach, realization. And so when we start to understand that there's these universal manifestations of gut feel, but we understand that we uniquely experience them differently, we can start to pinpoint our own signals, our own neurological, emotional, cognitive, all sorts of different signals that might be cueing ourselves in to the fact that we are experiencing a Eureka moment or a spidey sense or a jolt. The commonality is that Eureka moments are a prompt, and that's in line with what we thought. I've been struggling over this problem for weeks. And then, that is the solution. Yes, this completely fits. Spidey sense is something doesn't fit. It's incongruent. It's the classic, I'm in a dark alley. I shouldn't be here. But it can also be you're interviewing somebody and they look great on paper. Everything fits. But then for some reason, you're like, but why am I so hesitant? Why do I not want to hire this person? And then a jolt is like, wow, I've always thought of myself as this. And now I just read this article and I've completely shifted the way that I think about it now. And this is where we see people making drastic career changes, for example, where we see people making big moves in their lives. You're jolted into, wow, I should have been doing this, but I've been doing something else all along.
So for people who want to actually master gut feel and develop it as a skill set, I can see how that can be super helpful in terms of understanding how it manifests in people individually. I think people understand physical symptoms they might feel. I feel it in the pit of my stomach, or I get physically tense. What are other ways that those manifestations can be experienced by people?
I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say that we're in that situation that I mentioned before, where we're interviewing somebody and we're feeling like this, they look great on paper, but I don't know why that I don't want to hire this person. What does your spidey sense look like? What does it feel like? How do I actually expand the band of elasticity for me to be able to experience it and do something about it? So I talk in the book about something called the rule of 3, where let's say that I'm interviewing somebody. The rule of 3 says that I will not hire anyone unless I have met with them 3 different times in 3 different contexts. I have to meet with a job candidate 3 different times in 3 different contexts. And you're probably thinking, wow, this sounds exhausting. Who has time to meet with somebody 3 different times in 3 different contexts? But actually, you can do this really, really quickly. You can do this all in the same 30-minute interview time span that you were going to be interviewing them anyways. You start the interview out, and you're in the normal office asking them the questions, tell me about your background, all those sort of things, even giving them case studies, whatever it is you do during the interview. And they seem to be nailing it. They're doing great on it. And so after 5 or 10 minutes, you don't need to continue doing that interview where they're really doing very, very well and saying all of the right things. But you can just say, this is great. Let me walk you around the office and show you around. Let me give you a tour of the office. Now you're in context number 2, with the first context being in your office, giving them the formal interview. Now you're walking around the office. You're bumping into your colleagues. And as you're bumping into your colleagues, you're saying, hey, let me introduce you to so-and-so. He or she is interviewing for this job in marketing. And that person then asks a question. You're observing now them in a very different circumstance. You're observing them with people who have different functional background than you. You're seeing them and you're picking up on different cues and signals and prompts that are going into this intuiting process. And then after you've shown them around, you can maybe even say like, there's a great coffee place downstairs. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Now you're in your third context. And this one's no longer in a corporate organizational context. Now you're with people that don't work at the organization. You're with people who work in a service-oriented field. You're seeing how do they treat waiters? How do they treat baristas? You might be noticing things like, wow, they seemed really confident when they were in the corporate structure, but now when they're here, I'm noticing they're more nervous. There's some oddities that I'm noticing. You might start to pick up on why did I have that spidey sense? And so what you're essentially doing is you're expanding your mental models, you're expanding your schemas, and you're training the way that you start to understand that intuiting process and how that process leads to that outcome.
What is your advice to professionals who feel that they've listened to their gut but then had failures? How can they use those experiences to improve future decision-making?
I talk a lot about how gut feel is about situational awareness just as much as is about understanding situational arrogance. And situational arrogance is something that happens to a lot of us, especially as we become experts in something. We start to use the same patterns that we might have used in a different area, in a new context. One of the ways that we can train our intuition, again, is by being experts and understanding our expertise, but with a novice perspective as well. But let's say you're an expert in brushing your teeth. You're an expert in lots of other things too, but you are an expert at brushing your teeth. And let's say you're right-handed. Are you right-handed?
Yes.
Okay. Every night you brush your teeth with your right hand. If tonight I then said, hey, Brett, brush your teeth with your left hand, and you start brushing your teeth with your left hand, you're still an expert at brushing your teeth. But in doing this, you start to notice things. You notice, oh my gosh, I feel more awkward doing this. And wow, this part of my gums really hurts and I've never noticed it before. You start to notice things that are different from what you would have noticed in your normal pattern of being that expert. So you start to open yourself up to the novice perspective, even as you still maintain your expertise. You might be an expert in marketing, or you might be an expert in strategic modeling, or, whatever it is. And how do we start to not lose that expertise, but be able to engage our intuition, engage those prompts, engage those signals in a way that doesn't make us fall prey to situational arrogance. Mm-hmm. And we can train that ability. And when we're able to train that, we're much less likely to have those failures that are due to not recognizing when there's that variable that might have shifted.
Great advice and totally fascinating. As we wrap up our conversation, is there one piece of advice that you hope to convey to leaders and aspiring leaders in terms of how they can use your ideas around intuition and gut feel to make better, smarter decisions?
I'm going to try and squeeze in two. I would say the first is that I alluded to this, but we do have our own individual intuition, but we also have a collective intuition. Teams, organizations, we can hone and harness that. And so I think that's important to recognize is that as leaders, we need to make sure we master our own intuition while still taking into account all of the people around us and how we can collectively integrate that into that executive summary. And then the second piece, our gut feel, it whispers to us. It's not screaming. There is so much out there, though, that is screaming at us. Physically loud. Ambulances, fire trucks, washing machines, but also loud in the sense that we don't have our own agency anymore. We're getting recommended the next movie to watch, the next YouTube clip to watch. Algorithms are telling us what to do and who to read and who to listen to and who the thought leaders are out there. But when we're making decisions and before even thinking about the decision ourselves, what we often do is we pick up the phone and we call somebody that we trust, or we have coffee with somebody that we trust, and we say, I'm trying to figure this out. What would you do? What's your advice? And we trust them. We believe them. But yet that's like filling a dinner party full of people who have voices and values that we do respect and value, but not saving a seat for ourselves in that dinner party, and not saving a seat for our perspective, which is sometimes much quieter, that's whispering to us. And so we shove that aside. And the more we shove that aside, the more the whispers are buried in this sea of screams. And so I would say listen to what whispers and not what screams. And the more we do that, the more we'll be able to master our intuition.
I love that. Listening to what whispers and make sure that you have the space and time and energy to hear your internal voice and that it isn't drowned out by everything else around us. Laura, thanks so much for being with us today at Rotman.
My pleasure.
Our guest has been Professor Laura Huang, and her new book is You Already Know, The Science of Mastering Your Intuition. This has been Visiting Experts, a Rotman School podcast for lifelong learners exploring transformative ideas about business and society with the influential scholars, thinkers, and leaders featured in our acclaimed speaker series. To find out about upcoming speakers and events visiting us here at Canada's leading business school, please visit rotman.utoronto.ca/events. If you enjoyed this episode, why not give some of our back catalog a listen? To stay on theme, check out our conversation with Richard Davis about mastering your ability to judge people, or Nuala Walsh on learning how to tune out the wrong type of information when trying to make decisions. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please consider giving this series a 5-star rating or dropping us a review. This episode was produced by Megan Haynes, recorded by Dan Mazzata, and edited by Damian Kearns. For more innovative thinking, head over to the Rotman Insights Hub and subscribe to our biweekly newsletter. Thanks for tuning in.